Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to answer a question that a lot of you have asked on the channel. How loud or how noisy is the brand new Mavic Mini when compared to other drones? And it's a tricky question to answer because any sound you hear, whether it be a drone up in the air or somebody standing next to you talking, is made up of two components: amplitude, which is the loudness, and the frequency of that sound, which is the noisy part. And I think what you're really asking is how annoying is this, because the loudness and the frequency really make up a sound that could be annoying or could be pleasant to your ear. So I'd like to separate these into two different tests. I'll attack the loudness part first because that's easy to answer. That's something we can measure, and I love measurements and I love math, so I can give you an exact number of how this compares from a loudness perspective to the other three drones that I have on the table. The second part of that, how noisy is it or how annoying is it, is a really subjective thing because all of us hear frequencies that we find annoying or pleasurable, and it varies a lot between people. Now, there are some frequencies that I think all of us would agree are really annoying frequencies, and I'll point those out. But the only way to really show you what's going on there is to take the sound files that I'm going to record and run them through what's called a spectrum analyzer that'll give us a visual representation of every frequency this thing generates compared to the other three, and then I can show you side by side if there are annoying frequencies in here that you won't find in the others or vice versa. So this first part's going to be a pure test with a sound meter where I'm actually going to put all three drones up about 15 feet away from me, and I'll measure it in dBAs to show you exactly how loud these particular quads are. When I'm done with that test, then I'll take it back out in the field. I'll put them all up at about 50 feet. I'll record the audio on a brand new Rode Video Mic Pro Plus, so I've got the same recording on each of them. I won't mess with the gains, and then we'll be able to listen to them side by side, and I can actually flip between the four quads, and then I'll run those recordings through a spectrum analyzer to give you a spectrograph to show you exactly what frequencies they generate, and then explain why some of these are more annoying than others. And I'll get into that in a second. So stay tuned, and I'll do the dBA testing next, and then I'll come back and we'll get into the sound testing. Before I start recording the quads, I want to get a level set just so we understand how much background noise there is in the area. So let me stop talking and we can measure that. Okay, it looks like it's right around 40 dBA, so we'll use that as a background level, and then when I fly the quads, we'll see how much louder it is. Looks like the Mavic Mini is about a 55 dBA. The Spark is about 60 dBA. Okay, I put the Mavic Air at about 61. The Mavic 2 Pro is about 56 dBA. I hope that section was helpful in answering the first question: how loud is the Mavic Mini when compared to three other popular quads? And I made that test as consistent as possible. I had all four quads 5 feet off the ground, 15 feet away from me, and I actually kept the sound level meter right in the camera frame so you could see the readings and make your own determination. Now, to my ear, two of the quads were a little bit louder than the other two quads, and that shouldn't be a surprise really because it's basic physics. For you to get any weight airborne, you've got to move a lot of air. And the heavier that weight is, the more air you have to move. So I've got a light quad, little heavier quad, little heavier quad. And the way you move that air is you spin a propeller, and the propeller slices through the air. And when it's slicing through the air, it does two things. It creates a low pressure system above it and a high pressure system below it. And it's actually pushing down on the high pressure system as it's being sucked up into that low pressure system above. Now, how much it creates that effect depends on three things: the length of the propeller, or its wingspan, the distance across the propeller, how wide it is, and the third one's a little bit more esoteric. It has to do with the curve of the propeller, because certain propellers that have unique curves on them can move more air with every rotation. But in essence, the longer it is, the fatter it is, and the curve determine how much air it moves. But all three of these have roughly the same size of propellers and shape of propellers, so lifting this guy takes a lot more work and energy than lifting this guy. Now the challenge becomes when you're moving that air, it elevates. But the other challenge is you're creating sound waves, and those sound waves we perceive as loudness. So the more sound waves I'm creating and more often, the louder something seems. So of course, this is going to seem louder, and this is going to seem louder even still. Now you might be asking, why does the Mavic 2 not make as much noise? Because it's certainly the biggest of the four quads. Well, the truth is, if you look at the wingspan of this, you've got a gigantic propeller, which means it's spinning more slowly to lift that weight. It's also got a really wide propeller on it. And third, it's got this really funky thing at the end here, which helps to knock down the noise quite a bit. So they've really done a tremendous amount of engineering with the Mavic 2 to keep it quiet. But for me, obviously, between the three, easily the quietest of the three as far as loudness goes. Now, the next one we're going to talk about has to do with noisy. And noisy is a tough thing because it's a very a personal thing. I may think something's noisy where it may not annoy you, because when you're creating those sound waves, you're not only creating this loud sound wave coming at you, you're creating frequencies within that sound wave, which certain people might find offensive and other people may not find offensive. And the best example I can give you is anytime I hear a dentist drill, I just freeze up. The same thing with dragging fingers across the blackboard. Both of those get to me, where some people they don't seem to bother. So it's a very personal thing. But I can tell you there are certain frequencies that everybody's bothered by. And when those blades spin, they're creating frequencies. And I'm going to show you in a minute how some of those frequencies are more prevalent in these two than they are in the other two. Now, the first test I'm going to give you is a really straightforward test. I'm going to put all 4 quads up to 50 feet. I'm going to record those with a Rode microphone, and I'll put them all in a quadrant. So you'll see all 4 of them at the same time. And I'll slowly step through all 4 of them so you can hear the difference between them. And I'll do that twice. I'll give you like 2 or 3 seconds on each, because listening to it and then stopping and listening to the next one, it's hard to compare them. So it's much easier if I kind of step through them pretty quickly so you can compare them side by side. And I'll do that twice. Once I'm done with that, I'll come back, I'll give you a little commentary, and then I'm going to finally take those sound recordings and put them through a spectrum analyzer, which will give me a spectrograph and show me exactly what frequencies all 4 of these quads are generating. And that'll give us a visual representation of maybe how annoying each quad is. And I'll line them up side by side and point out exactly some of the frequencies that these guys are generating that all of us are going to find annoying. And I think the best way to describe it is people have said it sounds like an angry swarm of bees heading towards you when you're flying these quads. And that's because of the frequencies they're generating. So stay tuned, and I'll show you the audio components first, and then we'll come back with the spectrographs. Those 4 recordings made it pretty obvious which of these drones is noisier up in the air when compared to the Mavic Mini. And the other thing I'm hoping you picked up on was all 4 of these drones were louder at 50 feet up in the air away from that microphone than they were 15 feet away from it in that first test. And the reason for that is that sound waves are very directional. So when you're standing next to it, you're not really getting all those sound waves because they don't emanate in a 360-degree pattern from that drone. When they're above you, these guys have to fight an awful lot to stay aloft. They're pushing a lot of air down. And because those sound waves are directional, if you're standing below it, it seems louder to you because you're getting more of those sound waves hitting your ear. The other thing that was interesting between them is they sounded a lot different up in the air. And the sounds they're making is really a kind of a rich fabric of a bunch of different frequencies they're generating based on their motors, how big their propellers are, what kind of electronic speed controls are driving those motors. And when you listen to it, it's really hard to tell the difference between them. You can't possibly discern what frequencies are being generated. The only way to really compare them fairly between each other is to run that audio recording through a spectrum analyzer, like I'd mentioned before, and put a spectrograph together. Now, what that spectrograph will do is give you a visual representation of all the frequencies each of these are generating, and you can see, number one, how many frequencies, and you can also tell how loud those frequencies are. So you'll know, does this one generate a frequency in a specific band louder than that one? And then once we have those frequencies, there are certain ones that will annoy you more than others. Now, an interesting side note here is as you get older, your hearing ability diminishes. So you stop hearing high frequency sounds and lower frequency sounds. You start to really congest all of your hearing into the center, which is where we speak most often. So you're not going to hear the high frequencies or the low frequencies. If you're younger, you can definitely hear that wide spectrum of frequencies. And if you're doubting me on that one, there's a lot of applications you can download for your phone that'll walk you through those frequencies. So try that one time when you're at a party with younger people and older people, and it'll walk through the frequencies, and I'm telling you, you're not going to hear a lot of them if you're my age. So anyway, back to the conversation. So the spectrum analyzer will tell us exactly what frequencies are being generated, and then we can compare them equally. And I'm going to guarantee you there are certain frequencies that we're all going to find annoying, and you're going to find that these two guys generate a lot of those frequencies. So first I'll put the Mavic Mini up. Now looking at that spectrograph, you can see that the red indicates there's a frequency being generated there. So the spectrum is sort of from blue all the way up through yellow. Yellow means that it's very, very loud. And you get to purple, it's pretty much diminished. So the Mavic Mini's got a pretty good mix of frequencies in there. Nothing really stands out. There's some below that 280 mark that are a little louder than others. But in general, it's a pretty evenly distributed curve of all the frequencies being generated. Now I'll put up the spark. Now you'll notice pretty quickly that there's a lot of loud frequencies in the spark, and very specifically, right around that 280 hertz band, there's a lot of frequencies being generated that are very, very loud. Now I'll put the Mavic Air up. Notice how I've got that same band of frequencies that are being generated, and a lot of frequencies lower than that as well that are very, very loud. So you can look at that spectrograph and know that there's going to be a lot of noise being generated by whatever it is that's creating that audio file. Now the Mavic 2 is up. Now again, the Mavic 2 is got some frequencies that are loud, but nothing that stands out. It's a very blended spectrum of frequencies where you're seeing a little bit of everything in there, which is pretty pleasant to the ear in most cases. Usually you get annoyed by frequencies that are loud, different than other frequencies. So you get this sort of, you pick up on that one and it just tends to be very annoying. Now, just to prove the point, you'll notice those two bands around 280 hertz. Those are the bands that really we find annoying as humans. There's a couple of them. That's one of them that's particularly annoying, especially to me. So when people hear that frequency, especially when it's really loud, it's going to stand out and they're immediately going to think, I hate drones. I hate the sound they make. And that's the noise that everybody refers to as that angry swarm of bees that's chasing you. Now, I'm going to give you a test here. I've actually got a 280 hertz frequency sample that I'm going to put up. So here's 280 hertz. Now tell me this isn't an annoying frequency to listen to. Yeah, that's what I thought. So what you've got are these two guys having that frequency emanating from them whenever they're flying. And again, I could go into a lot of detail of why that's happening. It's really a combination of the type of propellers they're using, the size, the width, the way the curve is on the blade, also the way they're pulsing those motors underneath that drive those propellers. It's an electronic speed control that does that, and not to get too nerdy, but these guys use digital speed controls. That's an analog sinusoidal speed control, and I believe they're using the brand new sinusoidals in this one as well. And the difference there is that with a DC ESC, it's punching voltage at that motor, so it's stepping it through it. So you're getting that choppiness in the propellers. By using a sinusoidal ESC, it's a much smoother transition. It can vary the speed and the pitch of the motors to adjust for variances in wind and direction and things like that. So it's a much smoother flight. So these two, just by nature of electronics alone, are going to be a little bit quieter. But I'm telling you that 280 hertz generation of frequency on these two guys is what's going to drive you nuts. So that's pretty much it. I guess in my conclusion, you heard all four of them. You can make your own assumptions on it. But to me, incredibly quiet up in the air, noisy in the air, noisier in the air, and really quiet in the air. So when you're comparing the two, if you say to me, which of these is least annoying? This guy by a long shot. This guy's pretty annoying, but if you get them up over 100 feet, they all kind of sound the same. So my recommendation is if you're flying these at a lake or park or around people, get them up to 100 feet as fast as you can. And when you fly them away, you can't fly over people, but don't even fly near people with them because that's going to cause them to look up. But if you're thinking about the Mavic Mini, there's no doubt that this thing is a lot quieter than the other two quads that I was just talking about a minute ago. So that should answer the question for you. And that's all I really wanted to get into today's clip. And again, if you have any questions about anything I've covered, I went through a lot of science and technical stuff, and I'm sorry if I bored you, but I love understanding not only the differences between them, but why there are differences there. And I hope you found that stuff interesting. So that's it for today. I've had a lot of fun putting this clip together, and I've got a lot more stuff coming. So if you're enjoying this, please subscribe to the channel, hit that little button down there, and you can join the Drone Valley family and enjoy the clips we're going to be posting over the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions, again, about anything I've covered, drop them in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to you as quickly as I can. And I've also got an entire week of Christmas clips coming up. We do the 12 days of Drone Valley Christmas every year, where I give away a ton of stuff. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you tune in right around the midpoint of December when I'm going to start those 12 days of Drone Valley Christmas, because you got a really good chance to win a lot of cool stuff. So anyway, that's it for today. Thanks an awful lot for watching. Thanks for your support. And until next time, happy flying. Thank you.